This is the final footage of diver Yuri Lipski as he descends into the blue hole, a place where the line between adventure and tragedy is razor thin. Heading towards the depths of 184 feet, he approaches an archway that has claimed the lives of many before him. What you're about to see is his final journey, an unbroken record of the last moments of a man who pushed his limits and paid the ultimate price. The sun beats down on the Red Sea coastline, casting a golden glow over the tranquil waters of Dahab, Egypt. This serene stretch, where the desert meets the sea, creates a stark, almost otherworldly beauty. Beneath the surface, however, lies something far more dangerous, a deep sinkhole known as the Blue Hole. At first glance, the Blue Hole seems like a diver's dream, a natural wonder with crystal clear waters, vibrant coral reefs teeming with marine life, and the promise of an underwater world like no other. The allure of this place is undeniable. It's the ultimate diving destination, drawing adventurers from across the globe. But beneath its inviting surface lies a dark reputation, the diver's cemetery. For decades, experienced divers have been drawn to its depths, mesmerized by the challenge of navigating the archway at 184 feet or 56 meters deep. However, many have not returned. The culmination of extreme depth, unpredictable conditions, and the silent grip of nitrogen narcosis has claimed the lives of over 200 divers. It is one of the most notorious dive sites in the world, a place where the beauty of the underwater worlds hides a deadly truth. On a fateful day in 2000, a 22-year-old diver from Israel, Yuri Lipski, would unknowingly become another name on the grim list. His goal was simple: to explore the stunning depths of the Blue Hole and record the beauty of the dive. Armed with his camera, mounted securely on his helmet, Yuri descended into the waters, eager to experience what many divers dreamed of. What he couldn't have known, however, was that the camera would capture his final moments, an unintended record of his tragic fate. Yuri was an experienced diver, but he was also young and eager to push his limits, just like so many others who had come before him. The Blue Hole, however, has a way of drawing even the most seasoned divers into its depths, promising wonder, but delivering peril. Throughout the video, I will be playing clips of his final dive leading up to the event, but due to the graphic nature of the content, I will not be showing any footage of the catastrophe itself. The footage is readily available on YouTube, but I would advise against searching it out, as it is quite disturbing. As Yuri slipped into the warm, inviting waters, the final descent was serene. His body effortlessly cut through the water as he passed the first 30 feet. Sunlight from above danced through the water, casting mesmerizing patterns on the seabed. The coral reefs surrounding the hole were alive with color, and schools of fish moved in synchronized patterns, undisturbed by his presence. The beauty of the place was overwhelming. At 60 feet, the light from the surface began to fade, and the world around him started to shift. The vibrant colors of the reef dimmed, and the water turned to a darker, more foreboding shade of blue. The deeper he descended, the less light there was to guide him, until at 100 feet, the world above seemed entirely distant. The water was cool, the pressure heavier now, but manageable. His breathing remained steady, the rhythmic sound of his air tank filling the space between his ears as the only noise in the growing silence. Yuri's confidence grew as he pushed farther, reaching for the threshold of the archway that lies 184 feet below the surface. This arch, a narrow tunnel through which the divers often pass into the open sea, had become a rite of passage for many who dared to venture into the Blue Hole. But with the bravery of this underwater passage came extreme danger, particularly for divers who failed to respect the limits of their equipment or their bodies. As Yuri reached the 184-foot mark, the effects of nitrogen narcosis likely began to set in. This phenomenon, often described as a rapture of the deep, occurs when a diver descends into depths where the pressure causes nitrogen in the air to dissolve into the bloodstream, impairing cognitive function. For Yuri, the symptoms of narcosis might have been subtle at first, an overwhelming sense of calm, perhaps even a slight euphoria. In these conditions, it's not unusual for divers to feel invincible, their minds clouded by the narcotic effects of the nitrogen. The deeper they go, the more their judgment becomes compromised. Divers often feel an exaggerated sense of confidence, pushing past their safety limits without realizing the dangers lurking beneath. Yuri, at this point, may have been experiencing that very sensation, an almost euphoric sense that everything was under control, that he was capable of handling whatever lay ahead. The arch was so close now. The passage between the blue hole and the open sea was beckoning him. But as Yuri ventured closer to the arch, something started to go wrong. His body was already under immense pressure from the depth, and the air in his tank would have become thinner, making every breath heavier. His judgment was clouded by the narcotic effects of the nitrogen, and his body's response time was slowing. Still, he pressed on. At 184 feet, Yuri was approaching the narrowest part of the archway, the most treacherous stretch of the blue hole. Divers who had passed through it before spoke of the eerie sensation of passing from one world into another, a threshold that marked the transition from the relative safety of the sinkhole into the vast, open sea. But the passage, beautiful as it was far from forgiving. It was an extreme test of both skill and judgment, with fatal consequences for those who were unprepared or too eager. Yuri, eager to conquer the archway, had no way of knowing just how unprepared he truly was. At this depth, the effects of nitrogen narcosis began to fully take load. Nitrogen narcosis is a physiological condition that occurs when divers descend to depths where the partial pressure of nitrogen increases. The gas begins to affect the brains in ways that mimic alcohol intoxication. At first, divers may feel a pleasant calm, but as the depth increases, so does the disorientation. The mind begins to cloud, and the ability to think clearly becomes compromised. What once seemed like an easy task, a simple navigation through the archway, now became a monumental challenge. Yuri's movements, once fluid and controlled, started to grow erratic. His breathing, still steady, may have become shallow, his mind struggling to process the situation. He likely felt a rush of confidence, almost a euphoric sense that he could handle anything, but deep down, he might have sensed that something was wrong. The narcosis was clouding his ability to assess his surroundings accurately, and he pushed forward, unaware that every second mattered. As he passed through the archway and into the open water beyond, the once familiar world turned into disorienting abyss. The tunnel that had once been clear and navigable now seemed like an inescapable void. The deeper he ventured, the more his sense of reality became warped. Colors faded into the shadow, the depth of the water grew darker, and his sense of direction likely became confused. Divers under the effect of narcosis often experience a disoriented sense of space and time, making it difficult to gauge how far they've gone or how much time has passed. In the growing darkness, Yuri's perception of distance and space was failing him. It's possible that he mistook the exit for something else. Perhaps he thought he was approaching the right direction, but then became trapped in the maze of the blue hole's underwater landscape. The narcosis played a cruel trick on his mind, confusing him in ways that were nearly impossible to overcome. His body, too, was beginning to betray him. The pressure at such depths, combined with the oxygen-depleted air in his tank, made each breath a more difficult and desperate struggle. As Yuri pressed on through the archway, the forces against him compounded. The cold water pressed in on him, the oxygen in his tank dwindled, and the narcosis continued to disorient him. It is believed that at some point, Yuri made a critical misstep. Perhaps swimming too far into the archway, or perhaps not recognizing the depth of his own physical limitations. His body, already under immense pressure, was struggling to cope with the depths and the effects of narcosis. He would have been swimming in a daze, the senses dulled by the narcotic-like effects of nitrogen at that depth. At some point, Yuri likely began to lose the ability to react properly, his movements slowing and his mental clarity slipped away. The exact moment of his demise is impossible to pinpoint, but it's likely he either lost consciousness from the lack of oxygen or became so disoriented that he couldn't make the right decisions to save himself. In the growing dark, the pressure of the depths, and the disorienting fog of nitrogen narcosis, Yuri's fate was sealed. The last images captured by his GoPro camera show him swimming deeper into the archway, a final attempt to push beyond the threshold that had claimed so many before him. He is shown continuously checking his depth gauge, which keeps beeping in a clear sign that something is wrong, as you hear his panic breathing in his final moments. The camera, which had faithfully recorded his descent, also recorded the moment he slipped beyond the point of no return, the footage a haunting testament to his tragic end. It's impossible to fully understand what Yuri experienced in those final moments. The combination of nitrogen narcosis and the overwhelming pressure of the dive would have altered his perception of reality, making it difficult to know if he fully understood the danger he was in. But what is clear is that, in the end, the blue hole took another victim. The depths, silent and unforgiving, claimed one more life in a place that had already earned its grim reputation as the diver's cemetery. The scene in the blue hole remained eerily still after Yuri's final moments. The water, once filled with vibrant energy and the promise of adventure, now enveloped him in a cold, indifferent silence. The diver's body, still tethered to the anchor of his own desires and ambitions, remained far from the reach of help. The depths of the blue hole, so beautifully deceptive in their initial allure, became the graveyard of another soul too drawn to their dangers. On the surface, the world was oblivious. It was only after Yuri failed to resurface with his dive group that the alarm was raised. His absence was not immediately noticed, as divers are often spread out across different depths and distances. But when it became clear that something was wrong, a search began, led by other divers who knew the dangers of the blue hole all too well. A search team was mobilized quickly, scouring the area for any sign of Yuri's movement. The search would be long and arduous. Divers knew well that the blue hole was no place to take shortcuts or rush into a rescue mission. The treacherous currents, the vast expanse of the underwater labyrinth, and the complicated nature of the dive made any recovery attempt difficult at best. Days would pass, but Yuri's body would not be found for some time. When the body was eventually discovered, it was in the blue hole's cavernous depths, far past the archway, a place where so many others had fallen victim to their own desires for exploration and adventure. The GoPro camera mounted on his helmet, recording the last moments of his life, was retrieved with the body. The footage, chilling and tragic, would be studied by many, a silent reminder of the fragility of human life against the vastness of nature. The footage would later be released, a raw and unflinching record of a diver's final plunge into the abyss. The news of Yuri's death reverberated across the diving community. He was young, passionate, and determined, qualities that had led him to push the limits of what was possible. Yet, in this dangerous sport, even the most experienced divers can fall prey to the unforgiving nature of the blue hole. His death was a stark reminder that no matter how skilled a diver may be, there is always an element of risk, especially when dealing with such extreme depths and conditions. His family and friends were left to mourn the loss of a young man who had been full of life and promise. The grief was compounded by the tragic and unexpected nature of his passing. Those who knew him spoke of his love for adventure and his passion for diving, and they struggled to comprehend how someone so full of life could be taken so suddenly. The blue hole, with all its mystery and allure, remains a reminder of the fine line between adventure and tragedy. For all the thrill it offers, there is a price to pay, a price that many have paid before Yuri, and many will continue to pay. But in his death, Yuri Lipski's legacy will not be one of failure. It will be one of caution, a warning to those who seek to push the boundaries of human limits, to respect the dangers beneath the surface, and to remember that some depths are too great to conquer. My deepest condolences to his family, friends, and the diving community. May Yuri's spirit rest in peace.